I'm going to show you how I created this painting called Windswept, which is inspired by my coastal walk near where I live. And I'm using acrylic paint, and what I'm doing here is I'm adding some texture paste with a bit of acrylic just to apply some muslin to the base of the board. This is an MDF board which I've gessoed, and I'm just adding this. This is going to add some real texture to the foreground of the painting. I'm now using a brush, and I'm going to start to bring in some other colours. This really is an underpainting, so I'm just trying to get some colour and texture down on the board in the first instance, and then later on I'll let it dry and then work over it. So I like to create layers in my work. So I'm working very freely. I'm working from a photograph, but I'm trying to sort of add my own kind of expression to the painting. It's a walk that I do most days. I'm lucky to live near the sea, so every time I go out, really, it's a different view. So, so I'm very lucky, and I thought it would be a good idea to do some local paintings inspired by the local area. And as you can see, I'm really, it is an underpainting. It's not the final colours that are going on here. This is colour that will actually just perhaps peep through a little bit through the final layer. I'm not getting detail. What I want is that atmosphere and the expression of the walk. And I think that is the point where I left it to dry overnight. Now I'm back working on the painting with the palette knife. This time it's acrylic. It's still acrylic. With this painting, I'm using just acrylic. And the foreground has got the muslin underneath the paint, so that's very textural. But even other areas, there's quite a lot of paint which also creates some texture. So you can see I'm working with a palette knife, and now I'm just dragging the paint over the board, and you can see this is obviously it's basically a seascape, and I'm just bringing in some lighter colour, dragging it over. You can see how it's picking up some of the texture. There, I'm going in with a brush now. That's going to give it a nice softer look. So the good thing about using the palette knife and the brush, you can get these different textures and expression with the different ways of applying the paint. And acrylic's very versatile, so I use a heavy body acrylic, which is great if you want to apply thicker areas of paint and use a palette knife. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm putting the paint on. Well, that's quite thick. I'm dragging it across. A lot of that yellow is showing through at the moment, and it will be interesting to see how much of that's left at the end. So it's lovely to get these layers, and you often get that in the sky, particularly you get these layers of colour. So it's quite a nice way to create that effect. And here you can see a lot of this lovely texture that I created in the first instance. Using very thick paint, I'm dragging it across, so some of that colour underneath will still show through and create this lovely layered effect. I always mix my colours. Very rarely do I use earth colours. I use quite sort of basic colours that I mix to get all the different tones. And that way I find you get very sort of individual colours that you can adjust and create your own colour. It's fantastic. And here you can see I'm building up on this foreground area. I really want that to come forward, and it's quite dark. That's going to give a lovely contrast to the lighter areas on the water and in the sky. And the red underneath is working really well because it's providing a bit of contrast to these dark colours that I'm putting over the top. And that's also going to help to bring this forward, this foreground forward. And there were lots of sort of grasses and foliage on this particular sort of rough ground near the beach. And you could see I'm not sort of trying to paint everything individually. I'm trying to create the effect of that with the texture, with the way I'm applying the paint with the edge of the palette knife. So it's quite, with this particular piece of work, it's quite, in a way, it's quite a simple landscape, and one in which I could be very expressive with it, just to create that atmosphere, not trying to put detail. Great thing about acrylic is you can work over it very quickly, it dries quickly, and you can use it thick and thin ways. So I find it a very versatile medium to work with. I do like working with oils as well, particularly. It has a different feel, but for these smaller pieces, sometimes I think it's, especially when adding bits of collage or other textures in, it's a great medium. And now you can see the sky. I'm bringing more light in, tissue, different way of applying the paint. That's just softened it a bit. So still more layers, still some of that yellow coming through, which I really like because it's adding warmth there. And some really light areas where that light is catching on the shore, the sand and the foreground of this view. And there it is. So it's quite abstract in a way. I hope you enjoyed watching.